Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro presided over Tuesday the creation in Caracas of the National Council for Sovereignty and Peace. In Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro is ordered to pay the equivalent of almost $180,000 for causing collective moral damage with his racist statements in 2021. Ecuadorian President Noboa issued Tuesday a state of emergency in at least 7 provinces of the country, amid protests over the elimination of the diesel subsidy. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Sophie Fernanda from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro presided over Tuesday the creation in Caracas of the National Council for Sovereignty and Peace. During the event's closing address, the Bolivarian head of state highlighted the importance of the council as another step to strengthen the unity of all Venezuelans, to defend the nation's sovereignty and peace. Maduro accused the United States government of carrying out what he described as a multifaceted war against the Bolivarian nation, violating all international laws. The president also affirmed that the majority of the Venezuelan people rejects Washington's military threats and reiterated that the country's internal problems are settled by Venezuelans through dialogue based on the Constitution.
Branches of the national economy. In the speech of ANSA's president also varied.
During his speech, President Nicolás Maduro affirmed that the U.S. threats against Venezuela have awakened a feeling of love among the people of the Bolivarian nation.
So today, we are breathing here a spirit of faith in Venezuela. We're breathing, we can see it and hear it, a spirit of national union. The threats against Venezuela have awakening a feeling, a special feeling of love because of the right we have to exist, to live, and to develop in accordance with our knowledges.
President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, during his speech expressed that it is necessary to defend and show the truth of Venezuela, a country that, despite being threatened by the United States, is working and fighting for peace.
The idea is not only the confirmation of this council today, but also the making of tables, action tables, where we will, on one side, take diplomatic tasks to move forward in a process that goes with us through the whole planet and the world to show the truth of Venezuela and the truth of a country that still being under a blockade is still fighting for its peace. A table because there has been a lot of lies spread, false testimonies that have risen, and we're going to defend in all of the instances of the world the truth of Venezuela, the right that we have in front of imperial aggression.
For his part, the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy, Richard Granell, said Tuesday in Paraguay that he advocates for dialogue with the Venezuelan government to reach an agreement with the Bolivarian nation.
Nicolás Maduro, I've sat across from him, I've articulated the America First position. I understand what he wants. I believe that we can still have a deal. I believe in diplomacy. I believe in avoiding war.
In other news, the government of Colombia denounced Tuesday that the United States is using the desertification of countries cooperating in its so-called war against drugs as a political pressure to interfere in its internal affairs. In a statement on the social media X, President Gustavo Petro said Washington's wanted a puppet president in Colombia and affirmed that the Colombian people will decide if they want a corrupt government like that of Panama or one which defends national sovereignty. Petro's statement comes after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called Colombia's fight against drugs as erratic. The president also questioned the moral legitimacy of the United States in imposing labels on other nations, pointing out that Washington has not reduced the consumption of cocaine and fentanyl in his own society. Bolivia's Prime Minister of Social Defense and Controlled Substances, Jaime Mamami, rejected the report of the United States that denounces the non-compliance of the anti-drug policies in Bolivian territory. The Vice Minister expressed that the United States is not a recognized authority to evaluate the anti-drug policies of other states. At the same time, he highlighted the efforts made by the plurinational state of Bolivia under President Luis Arce in the fight against the drug trafficking. Mamami pointed out that the country is demonstrating its commitment to the frontal and transparent fight against drug trafficking by increasing the amount of seizures in the national territory. In addition, he reminded the U.S. that Bolivia is part of the United Nations, the entity in charge of evaluating drug policies. And now we have a short break coming up. But first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro was ordered by the Third Regional Court to pay the equivalent of almost $180,000 for causing collective moral damage with his racist statements in 2021. The unanimous ruling also requires Bolsonaro to remove discriminatory and intolerant content from his social media accounts and to issue a public apology to the African-American community. For his part, the Third Chamber of the Federal Regional Court made the decision unanimously and considered that the far-right politician engaged in so-called recreational racism. It should be noted that Bolsonaro faces a sentence of 27 years and 3 months in prison for leading a coup plot to try to prevent the inauguration of the current president, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. Also in Brazil, hundreds of civil construction workers decided to start an indefinite strike in the city of Belém, in the north of the country. 2 months before COP30, the United Nations Climate Change Summit, will be held suspended in the areas where the meeting will take place. Driven by discontent with wage adjustments, which are considered insufficient, trade unions are calling on workers to participate in a general strike. Accompanied by days of protest amid criticism of the high cost of the events, which increases tensions as the countdown of to COP30 continues. Meanwhile, in Ecuador, workers and residents of the city of Cuenca mobilized Tuesday on the main roads and highways of the area to protest the government's neoliberal policies and its elimination of the diesel subsidy. The demonstrators also denounced the establishment of open mines near water sources and strategic areas due to their negative impact on the economy and the lives of the residents, especially its vulnerable population. The protesters also described Noboa's policies as generating hunger, destitution, exploitation, and slavery. The workers' leaders affirmed that they will remain in permanent mobilization against the government's policies. And Ecuadorian President Noboa issued Tuesday a state of emergency in at least 7 provinces of the country amid protests over the elimination of the diesel subsidy. The measure will be enforced for 60 days and applies to provinces of Charichi, Imbabura, Santo Domingo, among others. The presidential decree suspends the right to freedom of public assembly during the 24 hours a day, although it does not restrict demonstrations. The norm also authorizes the armed forces and the national police to intervene in meetings where threats to security are identified. However, it does not include the implementation of a curfew. In other news, Colombia's Peace Tribunal issued Tuesday its first sentence against former FARC leaders for their roles in thousands of kidnappings. The ruling found 7 former leaders of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia guilty of imposing policies that led to the kidnapping of 21,000 people. The court said that the rebel group kidnapped civilians for ransoms to finance its operations, while also depriving soldiers and politicians of their liberty in hopes of exchanging them for imprisoned rebels. The sentence orders the former rebel leaders to work for 80 years on projects to find the bodies of missing people and remove landmines from rural areas. They also have to engage in symbolic acts of reparation with their victims, follow a strict schedule, and have their movements monitored by electronic devices.
No es solo una decisión judicial, es un compromiso con la restauración que se vigila.
In Mexico, citizens commemorate Independence Day in a ceremony led by President Claudia Sheinbaum from the National Palace balcony. The capital's Zócalo is decorated for the celebration of the Cry of Independence, uniting millions of Mexicans. This celebration preserves the memory of the day the libertarian movement began and honors its founders. Independence Day is a remembrance of Mexico's freedom heroes and a reaffirmation that the country's commitment to justice, sovereignty, and solidarity. Independence Day in Mexico is celebrated on September 16th, but the ceremony of the Cry of Independence is held on the night of September 15th to honor Miguel Hidalgo Costilla, who called on the population to take action.
Nothing can stop a nation when it's its people who support and defend it with pride, and when there is a government that does not distance itself from its people, from justice, from democracy, that in which sovereignty resides in the people and not in privilege. Mexican women and men, let us not forget that Mexico will always be a symbol of peace and world brotherhood, committed to cooperation, mutual respect, and the undisputed defense of the self-determination of the peoples.
And now we have a second short break coming up. But before, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break coming, don't go away. Welcome back. On Monday, the Israeli army launched its ground offensive to take the Palestinian city of Gaza, located in the north of the Strip, with its tanks advancing slowing after a series of intense airstrikes. The onslaught has forced some 300,000 people to flee the urban center, which in mid-August was home to about 1 million Palestinians. As a result of these new attacks, Palestinian health authorities reported that at least 68 people have been killed across Gaza since dawn on Tuesday alone, as the total death toll since the start of the Israeli aggression in October 2023 now stands at 64,905 people, with 164,926 wounded. Moreover, health authorities in Gaza warned the devastating figures could be higher, as they are struggling to rescue those still trapped under the rubble from collapsed buildings. In this context, more than 3,000 Palestinians have been forcibly displaced to Al-Mawasi in the Rafah governorate, which has been described as a concentration zone. The area, located along the southern coast of the Gaza Strip, lacks basic services, including water, healthcare, and food, with health authorities warning of the rapid spread of diseases due to overcrowding. Palestinians are being forced to flee their homes to escape the aggression by the Israeli occupation forces, who continue bombing residential buildings and shelters in clear violation of international law and human rights. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas warned that the advance of Israel's ground operations against Gaza are part of a plan of ethnic extermination with the U.S. support. Hamas movement asserted that the crimes against the Gaza Strip violate all international norms and are committed under the political and military covert of the United States, which bears full responsibility for the consequences of the aggression. In addition, they call on the international community to take responsible and decisive action in line with the scale of these massacres in the Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, a recent report by the United Nations accuses Israel of genocide for its attacks on the Gaza Strip, following almost 2 years of aggression against the Palestinian people. The United Nations inform concludes that, based on statements by Israeli officials and evidence on the ground, genocide is being committed with the intention of totally or partially destroying the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry in the occupied Palestinian territory declared Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and President Isaac Herzog responsible for crimes against Gaza. In this scenario, despite the evidence referred to by the UN, the Israeli Prime Minister of Foreign Affairs described the accusation as false and demanded the dissolution of the investigation commission.
Today, we witness in real time how the promise of never again is broken and tested in the eyes of the world. The ongoing genocide in Gaza is a moral outrage and a legal emergency. Member states must act now. There is no need to wait for the International Court of Justice to declare it a genocide. All states are obligated to use whatever means within its power to prevent the commission of genocide. And so we urge member states to ensure accountability for any crimes that have been committed.
Our reports over 2 years have built the full picture of the extent of the destruction. And the destruction is such, added in particular to the starvation policies, that the conditions of life in Gaza are unsupportable. The third category of genocidal act.
At least 16 countries around the world denounced the Israeli aggressions against the humanitarian global summit flotilla. International authorities expressed their concern about the security of the vessels that aim to reach Gaza and break the humanitarian blockade. On the other hand, they warned that any violation of the international rights, including strikes on the ships and the illegal arrest of participants, will be brought to international courts. The Global Summit Flotilla carries food and medicines, as well as over 300 activists, among them parliamentarians from France, Brazil, and Spain. In other news, Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Tuesday the site of the strategic exercises being conducted with Belarus, known as Zapad 2025. During his visit, the Russian leader inspected the military equipment, weapons, and techniques that are being developed in more than 41 land and naval training camps. The Russian head of state assured that the objective of drills is to strengthen security between Russia and Belarus in defense of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and protection. President Putin also expressed his gratitude for the presence of more than 23 observer countries, including 3 NATO members, the United States, Hungary, and Turkey. China urges the United States and Japan to withdraw the Typhoon missile system deployed in Japan as soon as possible, as the installation of this weapon system poses a substantial threat to the region's strategic security. Despite China's concerns, both nations insisted on deploying the missile system in the neighboring country, claiming it was for joint exercises and training. The deployment of the missile system by the U.S. in a nation harms security and increases risk of an armed race and military confrontation in the region. In this regard, the Chinese spokesperson Lin Jian argued that the United States and Japan must respect the security concerns of other countries, respond to the requests of countries in the region, and correct their erroneous practices. Moving to Africa, this Tuesday in the Republic of Malawi, the counting of votes began for the general elections in which the president, legislators and local councillors will be elected. Amidst a period of economic turmoil in the country, over 7 million registered voters turned out to the polls, while the Malawi Electoral Commission is under close scrutiny to ensure free and fair elections. In these elections, the current president, Lazarus Chakwera, is once again facing his rival, former President Peter Mutharika, after the last elections in 2020. Vote counting began late on Tuesday afternoon, and according to the law, the results must be announced within a week of the election date.
Madam, move away.
Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Sophie Fernandez. Thank you for watching.